The walls are closing in on Dr. Wendy Osefo. What started as a reported burglary in April 2024 has exploded into one of the most serious criminal cases in Real Housewives history. Wendy and her husband, Eddie were arrested in October 2025 on multiple fraud charges. They spent a night in jail. Their mugshots went viral. Their children saw everything on social media. And now, with their trial scheduled for April 2026, prosecutors are revealing devastating evidence that could send both of them to prison for over a decade. This is the complete breakdown of where the case stands right now in February 2026. On April 7, 2024, Wendy and Eddie Osefo reported a burglary at their Maryland home. According to their police report, they'd just returned from vacation in Jamaica to find their home had been ransacked. Thieves allegedly broke in through a second-floor bathroom window, went straight to their bedroom and closets, and stole approximately 80 items worth over $450,000. The list of stolen goods read like a luxury shopping spree gone wrong. Designer handbags, including multiple Hermes Birkin bags worth $30,000 each, high-end jewelry, including Wendy's anniversary diamond ring, expensive clothing, shoes, and other luxury items. The couple filed insurance claims seeking hundreds of thousands of dollars in payouts. On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward home burglary case. A wealthy reality television couple victimized by criminals who knew they were out of town. But Carroll County Sheriff's deputies who responded to the scene immediately noticed problems with the story. The alleged break-in point was a second-floor bathroom window, but there were no ladders anywhere near the house. The deck furniture beneath the window hadn't been disturbed. Most importantly, the toilet directly under the window was completely untouched. If someone had climbed through that window, they would have stepped on or knocked over the toilet, but it sat there perfectly, clean and undisturbed. Even more damning was the couple's ADT alarm system. When investigators checked the logs, they found no movement detected inside the home during the entire time the Osefos were in Jamaica. If burglars had actually entered the house and ransacked multiple rooms, the motion sensors would have triggered, but the system showed nothing. No alerts, no movement, no intrusion whatsoever. The security footage also failed to show any evidence of a break-in during the reported timeframe. Everything pointed to one conclusion: the burglary never happened. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered something even more shocking. Many of the items the Osefos claimed were stolen had actually been returned to stores for refunds before the alleged burglary even occurred. The couple had purchased expensive designer goods, reported them stolen, then investigators found receipts showing those exact items had been returned to retailers weeks or months before the supposed break-in. Other cases, the allegedly stolen items were still in the Osefos' possession. Wendy was photographed on social media wearing her anniversary diamond ring after she'd claimed it was stolen in the burglary. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't a case of mistaken timeline or confused documentation. This appeared to be deliberate insurance fraud. On Thursday, October 9, 2025, Carroll County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Osefo residence with arrest warrants. Wendy was sleeping when Eddie woke her to tell her police were at their door. The kids weren't home, having been sent to stay with family. Both Wendy and Eddie were taken into custody and transported to jail. They were booked, photographed for mugshots, and held in separate cells overnight. Wendy's mugshot went viral immediately. Instead of looking scared or upset, she was smiling slightly in the photo. Fans questioned why she'd smiled during an arrest for serious felony charges. At the Real Housewives of Potomac Season 10 reunion, filmed in February 2026, Wendy finally explained. She said the photographer who took her mugshot was trying to be nice and cheer her up during what was obviously a terrifying experience. He told her it would be okay and tried to make her feel better. So when he took the photo, she gave a small smile. She doesn't regret it, saying she was smiling through the pain. But the mugshot was the least of her problems. Wendy and Eddie each posted $50,000 bond and were released on Friday, October 10, 2025. They'd spent one night behind bars, and the experience was traumatic. At the RHOP reunion, both became emotional discussing that night. Eddie said he remembered being in the holding cell and seeing Wendy talking to her sister. He paused, clearly fighting back tears. Their daughter, Cameron, was with Wendy's sister when Wendy called, and hearing her little girl's innocent voice while sitting in jail broke Wendy's heart. Wendy explained that Cameron had no idea what was going on and was just happy to hear her mother's voice. The little girl said, "Okay, Mommy, I'll see you tomorrow," without understanding her parents had been arrested. Wendy said, "I was so scared. I was just worried about the kids. I'm so scared for them." What hurt her most was finding out later that her son Carter had seen everything on his phone, including the mugshots, but didn't tell his grandmother or aunt. He went to sleep carrying that knowledge alone, trying to process what was happening to his parents. Since the arrest, Wendy has started updating her children about the case so they're not left in the dark or learning about developments through social media. The family aspect of this case makes it even more devastating. 3 young children are watching their parents fight criminal charges that could send them both to prison. The charges against Wendy and Eddie Osefo are extensive and serious. After being indicted by a Carroll County grand jury in October 2025, the couple now faces a combined 34 criminal charges. Wendy faces 16 charges total, including 7 felony counts. Eddie faces 18 charges. The specific counts break down as follows. Both are charged with multiple counts of insurance fraud. This is the primary crime prosecutors alleged they committed by filing false insurance claims for items they either still possessed, had already returned to stores, or never owned. They allegedly attempted to defraud insurance companies out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. In Maryland, insurance fraud is classified based on the value of the fraudulent claim. Because the OSFOs claimed over $450,000 in stolen property and the threshold for felony insurance fraud is just $300. They're facing felony charges. The maximum penalty for felony insurance fraud in Maryland is up to 15 years in prison. They're also charged with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Conspiracy charges require prosecutors to prove that both Wendy and Eddie worked together to plan and execute the fraud scheme. The prosecution must establish that at least one of them took an overt act to further their illegal goal. An overt act doesn't have to be the actual crime itself. It can be something as simple as researching how to file an insurance claim, purchasing items specifically to report them stolen, or making phone calls to insurance companies. In Maryland, the punishment for conspiracy matches the punishment for the underlying crime, meaning they could face the same 15-year maximum sentence for conspiracy as for the fraud itself. Additionally, both face charges of making false statements to a police officer. This is a misdemeanor offense stemming from the statements they made when initially reporting the burglary. The maximum penalty for making false statements to law enforcement is 6 months in jail and a fine of up to $500. While this sounds minor compared to the fraud charges, it's still a criminal conviction that would go on their permanent records. If convicted on all counts, Wendy and Eddie Osefo could theoretically face over 15 years in prison. Even if they're not convicted on every single charge, a conviction on just the primary felony fraud counts could result in significant prison time. Maryland judges have discretion in sentencing, but fraud cases involving hundreds of thousands of dollars in false claims typically result in actual prison sentences, not just probation. One of the most shocking developments came during a contentious hearing on Friday, December 19, 2025. Prosecutor Melissa Hawkinsmith stood before Carroll County Circuit Court Judge Richard R. Titus and made a stunning declaration. Despite appearing wealthy on Real Housewives of Potomac, Wendy and Eddie actually have very little money. The prosecutors revealed that an investigation into the couple's finances showed they are burdened by substantial debt. The state requested access to 8 years' worth of the OIFO's personal and business financial records. Prosecutors argued the records were necessary to establish motive for the alleged fraud. If the Osefos were drowning in debt and desperate for money, that would explain why they'd allegedly stage a burglary and file false insurance claims. The defense fought back hard against the subpoenas, calling them a fishing expedition and arguing the financial records were private, confidential, and had no bearing on the outcome of the case. But Judge Titus sided with the prosecution. He ruled that the state could obtain the financial records, most of which they'd already received directly from the Osefos banks. During the hearing, prosecutors revealed explosive details about the couple's financial situation that painted a picture of people living far beyond their means. The OSO have approximately 40 credit and debit cards, some of which are believed to be in company names. 40 cards is an enormous number that suggests they've maxed out multiple accounts and kept opening new ones to maintain their lifestyle. Prosecutor Hawkinsmith compared the couple's spending to her own, noting she'd only ever spent around $300 on a handbag. Meanwhile, the Osos owned $30,000 Hermes Birkin bags, plural. The contrast illustrated just how disconnected their spending was from their actual financial reality. Even more bizarrely, prosecutors allege the Osefos have used aliases, including Pam Oliver and Eddie Hennessy, in what appears to be a deliberate attempt to mask their identity. The defense later clarified that any aliases were used solely for package deliveries to protect their identities as public figures, but prosecutors suggested the aliases were used on financial applications, which, if true, could constitute additional fraud. The most damning evidence came when investigators revealed they'd found 67 credit cards in 4 different high-end wallets belonging to the Osefos. One of those wallets was a lambkin black quilted Chanel wallet that the couple had previously reported stolen during the burglary. Think about that. They claimed a Chanel wallet was stolen, but investigators found it in their possession with 67 credit cards inside. The defense tried to explain this away by saying some cards were expired or linked to joint accounts, but the optics were terrible. Prosecutor Hawkinsmith told the judge that examining the OSO financial records would help demonstrate a pattern of excessive spending that could corroborate a motive for fraud. The public has an interest in these crimes, and to make sure justice is done in this case, she argued. Judge Titus agreed, and the subpoenas were approved. Now, prosecutors have access to detailed financial information spanning 8 years across 40 credit and debit cards, covering both personal and business accounts. That evidence will be presented at trial in April 2026. Wendy and Eddie have maintained their innocence since day one. At BravoCon 2025 in November, Wendy addressed the charges publicly for the first time. She told the crowd, "These are just snorts allegations," and promised her innocence would be proven once the legal process played out. She thanked fans for their support and expressed gratitude to her RHP cast members, the production team, and Bravo for standing by her during this difficult time. The couple's legal team, consisting of attorneys Jeremy Eldridge, Clarissa Lindsay, and Joseph Murtha, has been aggressive in fighting the charges. In November 2025, they released a statement accusing prosecutors of misleading the public regarding the Osefos' finances. The defense claimed that police failed to properly investigate the initial burglary despite clear signs of a break-in. They alleged bias against the Osefo family and pointed out that the couple received no updates from police for over 18 months, despite their full cooperation. The defense also highlighted what they called a highly irregular approach by prosecutors. They claim the state's investigation began only after charges were filed, which they argue raises questions about the investigation's motives and fairness. The attorneys emphasized that due process is crucial for justice and accused the state of breaching this principle by spreading a false narrative. Initially, Wendy and Eddie filed separate motions asking to be tried separately from each other. Wendy also asked for the charges to be dismissed entirely based on what she claimed was an illegal arrest. Both motions raised eyebrows among fans and legal observers. Why would a married couple facing charges together want separate trials? The speculation was that one might be planning to turn on the other, or they were trying to make it harder for prosecutors to prove conspiracy charges. But on December 2nd, 2025, during a court hearing, the couple reversed course completely. According to boots-on-the-ground reports from the What Else Is Going On podcast, Wendy and Eddie asked Judge Titus to be tried as co-defendants. The judge granted their request. The case will now move forward with the husband and wife facing trial together. Their next hearing was scheduled for December 19th, which is when the financial records battle played out. The decision to be tried together suggests their legal team believes a unified defense is stronger than separate ones. It also might indicate they're both sticking to the same story and aren't worried about one testifying against the other. However, it also means that if one of them makes a mistake on the stand, or if evidence is particularly damaging to one, it could sink both of their cases. As of February 2026, Wendy and Eddie Osefo are scheduled to go to trial in April 2026. The exact trial date hasn't been publicly confirmed, but it will take place in Carroll County Circuit Court. The trial is expected to last multiple days, possibly a full week or more given the number of charges and the complexity of the financial evidence. Prosecutors will present their case first. They'll call witnesses, including the Carroll County sheriffs, deputies who initially responded to the burglary report and became suspicious. They'll bring in the detectives who investigated and discovered the inconsistencies in the Osefos' story. They'll present evidence showing that items reported stolen were actually returned to stores before the alleged burglary, or were still in the Osefos' possession afterward. The photograph of Wendy wearing her anniversary diamond ring that she claimed was stolen will likely be shown to the jury. The ADT alarm records showing no movement in the house during the supposed break-in will be critical evidence. The receipts proving items were returned to retailers will demonstrate alleged fraud. Prosecutors will also present the financial records they fought so hard to obtain. They'll show the jury the approximately 40 credit and debit cards the OOS maintained. They'll detail the couple's spending patterns and debt levels. They'll argue this establishes clear motive. The Osefos needed money desperately, so they staged a fake burglary to collect insurance payouts. The 67 credit cards found in the Chanel wallet that was supposedly stolen will be powerful visual evidence of the alleged scheme. The defense will then present their case. They'll likely argue that the burglary was real and that any inconsistencies in the evidence can be explained. They'll claim police bias and improper investigation. They'll emphasize that the Osefos cooperated fully with law enforcement and waited 18 months for updates before suddenly being arrested. They may call character witnesses to testify about Wendy's reputation as an educated professional with multiple degrees and a successful career. They might argue that someone of her stature wouldn't risk everything for an insurance fraud scheme. The biggest question is whether Wendy and Eddie will testify in their own defense. Taking the stand is always risky because it opens them up to cross-examination by prosecutors. But in a case like this, where they're claiming innocence, not testifying, might make them look guilty. If they do testify, prosecutors will grill them about every inconsistency, every piece of evidence that contradicts their story, and their financial desperation. After both sides present their cases, the jury will deliberate. They'll have to decide whether prosecutors proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the OSO staged the burglary and filed false insurance claims. If the jury convicts on any of the charges, sentencing will follow. Maryland's sentencing guidelines for felony fraud involving amounts over $100,000 typically recommend prison time, not just probation. The actual sentence will be up to the judge, but prosecutors will likely push for significant prison time given the amount of money involved and what they describe as a deliberate, planned scheme. The evidence against Wendy and Eddie O appears overwhelming. With trial set for April 2026, they face up to 15 years in prison for allegedly staging a $450,000 insurance fraud. Their children are watching, Bravo is filming, and justice is coming. Subscribe for updates when the verdict is announced.